My name is Charlene Lewis Sutherland, and I have two daughters. They're 4 and 1, and it's been really important for me and my partner to teach them about how to love themselves. So I assumed that I would have a conversation with them about beauty, about love, and I guess I assumed that would come around 14, 13, 12, maybe even some preteen years where it was particularly awkward. But I actually had that conversation a lot earlier than I'd expected. My daughter was around 2, and someone who was babysitting her let her watch The Little Mermaid. And at home, we were talking, and she brought up Ariel. And she was talking about Ariel, and she wanted her hair to be like Ariel. And I had to tell her, no, it's not like Ariel. It's like your hair is like your hair, and it's great. And she said she wanted it to be like Ariel's, and she took her hair in her hand and she started to pull it, tried to pull it straight, and when realized she couldn't pull it straight, she started to cry, and I naturally got upset. And I guess I probably didn't realize that, okay, we have to talk about what it means to love yourself, what it means to look like who you look like, what it means to be yourself and be proud of that. And so that conversation happened a lot earlier than I was expecting it to happen. And it actually sparked something in me. So I went to the computer and I started typing in books to teach children about loving themselves, books for colored girls, books that have, protagonists who are Black, who are people of color, books to teach children about their hair, about loving their hair. And I literally went on Amazon and I spent over $100 over the course of, I don't know how many weeks, just buying books. Princess Cupcake, she's a Black little princess, and her family, there's the queen and the king, and they're also Black, and they're drawn so well, and they're represented so well, and they come off as very classy, and it's an interesting story, and it's about a little girl. Books about having big hair and loving big hair, about having curly hair. So I began to think about what we were exposing her to, and we kind of had to have a conversation, my partner and I, and shift it. So as before, when people would give dolls or toys, or, you'd buy them something, not thinking about it, be it like an Elsa doll. Now we were making a conscious effort. Okay, well, if we're going to buy her something, I feel like it should be something that helps her understand her self-worth. So I actually we got a chance to watch the movie Home, and I was so excited about this movie because it's starring, it's a little girl of color, and she has curly hair, almost exactly like the way my daughter's hair looks, and so excited. I'm like, yes, and Rihanna does the voice, and so we watched it. Aside from the fact that it's not a particularly good movie, and most of the speaking part goes to this little character called a Boov, who was a very annoying voice. Afterwards, I was, I talk about it. Oh, Tip, yeah, and Tip wears her hair like you wear it sometimes. You put it back like this, like Tip's hair. And, I was trying to get her excited. And I went on Amazon.ca, and I couldn't find any toys or follow-up books or things to help, kind of solidify, how we feel about Tip, and, maybe we should have like maybe a Tip doll, because you might like that, and you could play with her hair, or, a Tip book. Either non-existent or extremely expensive. And I was very, very let down, very, very upset. I would go to Indigo or go to the bookstore, and most of the books would be about the Boovs. So here we have this opportunity where we have like a major film company, I think maybe DreamWorks, and they've, got a story, they've got a movie, it's starring a little girl of color, and the promotion, where is it? It's, little to not there. And not that it's extremely important to have dolls or toys, but, she's little. She was 2, she was 3, that's the kind of stuff that speaks to them. It's the things they can play with. It's the things they look at. And it's not even just at the toy store, because if I go to the grocery store, Elsa's face is going to be on a box of Cheerios. It's going to be on a box of like snacks. It's going to be all over the place. It's plastered. You have images of these white princesses just plastered all over the place. And that's all well and good. But for the girls who don't look like Elsa, the girls who have curly hair, the girls who have darker skin, they're looking for themselves too. And they're finding themselves nowhere. I read an article that talked about how a person's mother was kind of the first person that taught them about what it is to not be happy with their body, because she would always insult herself in front of her kids. And so I became very conscious of that. And I don't insult my body. I don't, I don't frown about what weight I've put on or what I look like in front of my kids, because I want them to understand that, I think I'm beautiful, and I want them to see that too. And I know they do. Your kids, they look up to you and they idolize you. But if I put myself down, or if I, question that beauty in front of them, it'll open the door for them to do the same. So I definitely don't do that. If I don't have to wear like clothing, if I'm going from the bathroom to the bedroom and I'm going to get dressed, I won't put on a towel if I don't have to. And, my daughters are very aware of what their mom looks like. She doesn't, hide all the time. This is what she looks like. It's a number of things, and I'm proud of it. So I'm not upset about that. I think raising girls as well, there's a lot of pressure that comes also from the outside when people meet them, or when they say hi to them, or, even if it's a family member that's greeting them. A lot of the times they come in and they'll talk about just how beautiful they are. So I think part of teaching them to love themselves is, yes, reflecting that I do find my daughters beautiful. I think they're very beautiful, but I think they're beautiful inside as well. So, if they come and they want to talk about how pretty they are, what they're wearing, there's a concern, and I think it's a natural one, that they'll understand that as a woman, beauty is an important thing and it's prized. And don't get me wrong, they don't need to look very far to have that mirrored back to them, that beauty is prized. It's on a billboard, it's on signs, it's on the street, it's in magazines. But I also want them to understand that what's in their head, so them being clever or funny or kind, that's also really important, and that I prize that as well too. So when I compliment them, when we give them good feedback, it's about how smart they are, or how clever, or something they said that's absolutely clever, or that's absolutely hilarious, how good they are with each other. You're so good with your sister, you really help her, she really values your company, I really value your company. We just really want to reinforce at the same time that as a person, these are the traits that we also think are important. And as a girl, you don't have to be entirely concerned with what you wear, how you look, because there will be no shortage of that sentiment when they get older. So they need to know that their parents think it's not necessarily important, and hopefully, when they get older, they'll understand that it's not necessarily that important, and they'll be armed with enough support that they can go out into the world and project that and not be worried about, any blowback in that end. We don't really shelter them from media, but we don't always have the opportunity to engage in it. So if something comes up, I'll definitely discuss it and I'll be really forthright. One thing I can think of specifically is, there's been, an unending storm in the media of recent about the violation of Black bodies, and just the disdain that, let's say, the police or the people in power are showing about that. And it made me think about my relationship to the police, and I've always felt nervous, suspect, like a little on edge. I don't know if it's walking by someone and then knowing that they have a loaded weapon, which makes me very, very nervous. There are police everywhere downtown now, and they're directing traffic. And sometimes we can be at a corner, and I could be at a corner with my kid who's about eye height with a gun. And I think that makes me really nervous. And when we have to stop, and if she asks me questions about the police, so far they've been simple, but I know this, and I've talked to my sister about this, and she told me about when she had a conversation with her son about police, and she was just frank, and she gave statistics, and she said, this is what's going on. And he was really sad. It made him very sad, but then it gave him a greater understanding of the world that he lives in. And, she happened to watch him have a conversation with his friends, and he explained something to them, and she realized that it was the right time for him. So I feel like, kind of waiting for her to show an interest in a subject and then coming with the truth as I understand it is how I want to approach that. So, if it's the media, if it's why people are so upset, who is Donald Trump? Why are people scared? When she comes with those questions, I'm more than happy to engage and to be honest and not hide anything, but also phrase it in a manner that I feel she, as a 4-year-old, would understand. And, sometimes it could be scary, but it's necessary. I don't want to lie to my children. I don't think that's healthy or necessary. My husband, my partner, is white, and I remember, when I was pregnant, having a conversation with him, and just not necessarily reminding him, but maybe I guess you could say reminding him that he is now raising black children. And you might think, oh, well, no, they're biracial, they're part white and they're part black. Sure. That's true. That's not untrue. And when they're older, they'll get a chance to define their identities. But Barack Obama is the United States, or the Americans' first black president. People still see people who have a black parent as a black person. And, that's for better or worse, that's where we are right now. It's 2016, and this is the world in which we're living. So, he's raising black children. He's raising children of color. And, we had a conversation where, I was talking to him, and I was like, I just want you to know what that means. And that means that, you're in it. Like, you're in the mix, like you're in the community forever. We could get divorced, before we had kids, and he could marry whomever. But now that he has 2 girls who are girls of color, he's forever connected to the black community. He's forever connected to the community of color. And that means he has to step up his game. And he was like, well, what does that mean? I'm like, well, you are an ally now, and you have to be an active ally. That means like taking an interest in things that affect our community, taking an interest in the way, things are portrayed. So, he has my full support. So when we talk about the media, or when we talk about cartoons, or when we talk about different representations for kids, he's on side. And I think it's extremely important that he's on side, that he's not like, oh, well, whatever, just hand her the Ylleya doll if she wants the Ylleya doll, or just buy her the Frozen things if she wants the Frozen things. I'm not trying to tell her what to like and what not to like, but I think it's also important that we provide her with all these different options. And, he's game for that, and he understands that, and he understands why that's important. And, and it, maybe at first it came with like prompting or coaching, but now, I see him as being, kind of, making himself informed and, actively parenting in a manner that like supports the fact that he's raising, girls of color. And at the same time too, it's interesting because, he has an experience that is very different from my own. So, what he brings to the table, or his point of view, is totally outside of, what I could potentially understand it from being as like, being a woman and a woman of color. So it's very interesting. We have very interesting conversations. And at the end of the day, I think, we're on the same page with how we want to interact and how we want our kids to understand the world and how we want them to, love themselves. And the part of, I think, loving themselves as well is, just these little pieces of information or that comes at a younger age than I would have naturally supposed it did. So, when I had kids, I had kind of no idea. I think every parent really has no idea what they're doing, and then something happens and then you react to it. But it was also important for us to say, okay, hey, we need to be proactive about certain things as well, because these will come up. And, one of the things I think that's super important is the conversation about consent. And as a young person, or as someone who's raising young people, you might think, okay, well, aren't they a little bit young to be talking about consent? But really understanding their body, understanding that it's theirs, understanding the value of their body are all the foundations of understanding and understanding the importance of consent. So, when we talk about our bodies, when we talk about our ownership over our bodies, I think, it's extremely important to lay that foundation. And an example of that is even something small like tickling. Oh, well, if you're playing with a kid and, you're poking them or tickling them and they're laughing, and, some people are tickled and they don't like to be tickled. Well, when they ask you to stop and you stop, there's an example of teaching consent. You don't want me to do this? You don't want me to touch you? Okay. All right. And if you want, when we're ready to play again, you'll let me know and you'll initiate the game. And that's also important. But understanding consent can be something as kind of simple and obvious as stopping the tickles, or you give them a big hug and like lots of kisses, and then they say no. Well, no means no. Even in an adult kid situation where you're like, oh, well, we're just playing around. But I want them to mirror that they had a desire. They were through with their body being touched. They were through with their body being held, and they, made that desire known. And then the person respected it. And even if the person is their mommy, and even if the person's like giving them tickles or cuddles, that's still really important. And, it kind of goes back to when we were younger. I had white Barbies, I had white dolls. I'm fairly certain I may have had one or two black dolls, but the majority were white dolls. And the way, we looked at the world, or what seemed normal, was these white dolls, these white images. When you look at Band-Aids, they are one color. It's not this color. They are, like a nude color. But it's not my naked, it's not my nude. When we color in class, we would have a pencil crayon or a crayon that would be peach, and people would actively call it skin color. Pass me the skin color pencil crayon or the skin color crayon. Well, that wasn't my skin color, and it wasn't, the Caucasian person's skin color, the white person's skin color. It was just skin color, because that was what the majority was, and anything else was a minority. It was a visible minority. And it definitely didn't feel good. It definitely didn't feel good to be on the outside or not see yourself ever represented, when you're younger, to watch the Disney movies. I've seen so many Disney movies, and we're very, very we think about what we will show our daughter. We don't just like go through the Disney archives and throw something on. My preference is something starring animals, or something with people of color, or something with a representation that is maybe slightly more interesting than the average, and that also maybe promotes feminism as best a Disney film or as best a cartoon can. But, I have very vivid memories of chemically relaxing our hair so that it would be straight, so that it would look more like the images that we were constantly confronted with. And so that could mean, what that did mean was dissatisfaction with the way my hair actually was, with the way my hair naturally was, and wanting it to be silky smooth. I just remember oodles of infomercials with people and relaxer and dye shaking their hair and having their hair be silky or manageable, and it was always better. It was always better than what you had at the present. And, not that long ago, I made a decision that I wasn't going to put chemicals in my hair, because it was not important to me. And I like my hair the way it is, the way it comes out of my head. And also that stuff is super poisonous. And I don't, blame my mom, because the conversation about natural hair and the beauty surrounding natural hair, it's not a new conversation, because obviously, froze in the 70s in North America were very big. But I feel like then the 80s happened, and, things were different. And, just, I feel like the reemergence, the love surrounding natural hair feels like a kind of like a rebirth, at least in this particular, like, part of North America in which I currently live. I'm sure other places, that's not been the case, but, I'm like confronted constantly with news stories, often coming out of the Caribbean or the States, where, principals or, girls are having froze or having natural hair, and they're being sent home, or they're being given letters, or they're being told that that's not beautiful, or they'll have dreads and they'll be told that that's not appropriate. So, still in 2016, girls of color are constantly facing what it means to look different, or to be in a minority, even when it comes to their own hair, which is their own business, and to kind of conform to something that looks different, and to not love their hair, to not love what's growing out of their head, but they have literally, like no control over what comes out. But when it comes out, yeah, okay, make it look like X or Y. Well, unfortunately, that's our choice that we get to make. And if we don't want to flat iron it or straighten it or chemically treat it, I feel like that needs to be praised and not put down. So it's ultimately a little sad, but I'm trying to be that hair example also for my daughter. I'm like, I wear my hair the way I wear it, and I talk about loving it, and I talk about loving myself, and I want them to understand that, and I want them to hopefully see some of that, and you can't protect them, as much as I would love to hold them and shelter them and make sure nobody says anything bad to them or bad in front of them forever. I know that's not the case. And everything we do, from talking about loving ourselves to talking about loving them to talking about our bodies, is in my mind just kind of giving them a little piece of armor that they can use to defend themselves in the future when they're more cognizant of the need for that against negative images or negative attacks or feelings of negativity, and maybe build up their confidence and their self-esteem so that they are better equipped to deal with some of these situations, because they're going to go off and they're going to hear what they hear, and maybe at the end of the day they'll remember something that we said, or conversation that we had, or something that we value in our house, and that was what will win out in the end when it comes to dealing with, loving themselves and not being like everybody else.